Thank you. Thank you. Spain is a country that was founded by the merger of two kingdoms. And when any merger takes place, there are always compromises that happen. In this case, the major cities of Spain were all port cities. And so as not to offend the aristocracies in all of those cities, King Philip II in 1561 decreed that Madrid, a very tiny, insignificant city in the middle of the country, would be this new state's capital. And this created a massive logistic problem because supplies had to be brought in from the ports to Madrid, and that could only be done by ox and cart. The problem with ox and cart is not only is it slow, I mean, for the time it was the best they had, but oxen consume a lot of resources. And because of the great distance that was traveled, most of the stuff that was actually carted was consumed by the ox by the time it got to Madrid. This problem was solved with the advent of the railroad, but by that time it was too late for Spain. Spain had fleets that had circled the globe, had conquered distant lands, and had brought home more wealth than any other country in Europe. Yet they were the poorest among all of Western European countries, largely because they had squandered their wealth on the extravagance of their capital and the inefficiency and lack of productivity in their transportation system. In the United States in the 1930s, we developed a vision, a plan for how we were going to exploit this great new invention of the automobile to bring prosperity across the country. And while this vision was grand, it pales in comparison to what we actually did. What we actually did was far grander than anything we ever envisioned. In fact, along the premise that if a little bit is good, more must be better, we have spent the last 60 years reconfiguring basically every space that we have to be able to accommodate automobile traffic, to be able to get us from one place to another, not only connecting places, but connecting within our communities. One of the best ways to envision this would be looking at what the road out in front of my house growing up has evolved in just my short lifetime. When I was a kid, the road in front of, I grew up on a small farm here in Minnesota. It was literally a 2-cart path through the woods. As I became a little bit older, it turned into a gravel road. And now today my parents live on what is a high-speed, high-capacity paved road. Now, those initial advancements of connecting places through highway systems were amazing. And the productivity gains that it gave us as a people can hardly be estimated. Now I can drive to Minneapolis, St. Paul in 2 hours instead of the 4 hours that it used to take my parents when I was a young kid. But the idea that I can get to town now in 8 minutes instead of 10 points out that there's a diminishing returns to this approach. The American Society of Civil Engineers recently came out with a report that kind of demonstrates this. They indicated that we are failing to maintain all this infrastructure that we've built. And if we continue to fail to maintain it to the level that is needed, we will experience between now and 2020 $1 trillion of losses to our families and our businesses. The problem is, in order to avoid this $1 trillion of losses, we need to spend $2.2 trillion. This gets more ridiculous as we go out further. The same report said that the GDP loss between now and 2040 will be equivalent in tax loss to the federal government of $540 billion. In order to avoid that tax loss, we need to spend $6.6 trillion on maintaining our infrastructure. This is a ridiculously unproductive system. How did we get here? It's important to understand what the highway system was. It was a replacement for the railroad. And the railroad, as its name implies, is a road on rails, a very efficient system. A railroad connects two places. And notice I said places, not cities. It connected one place to another with a very efficient connection in between. When we built highways as roads that connected two places, they function incredibly well. Now you didn't have to wait for the train schedule anymore. You could just get in your car and drive from one place to another. The problem in this country is that we've changed what a road is. We don't build roads anymore, or we've introduced elements of streets into roads. We've confused the two. So our roads are no longer efficient connections between two places. They're places with intersections, there's places with accesses, there's stopping cars, merging cars, all kinds of things. When you look at our places then, a street is a network within a place to allow you to get around, okay? Streets not only move cars, but streets accommodate parked cars, they accommodate people walking, they accommodate people biking, they accommodate people in wheelchairs and roller skating. They serve as a framework for capturing value in tax base from businesses, from houses, from office buildings, from hotels. We in this country have started to reconfigure our streets to actually have characteristics of roads. And when we do that, what happens is we're no longer able to capture the value because so much of the space is turned into parking lots and the development just flees this, it just disappears. And you wind up with space that financially is incredibly unproductive. This suburban experiment that we're on, and it's important to understand that this is an experiment. No other civilization in the history of mankind has built their environment the way we have built ours. We are doing something that has never been done on this scale before. The way we built it in its first life cycle was through taking our savings and investment and using it to build this system. Okay? When we got to the end of the first life cycle, what we found is that the wealth generated, the prosperity created from this investment, did not generate enough excess wealth to maintain the system. And so what did we do? This is a graph of debt. Now, we're all familiar with the narrative about how huge the federal debt is. Trillions of dollars, it's an unfathomable amount of money. The federal debt is actually the bottom blue line. The top green one, the one that soars off into the stratosphere, that's our private sector debt. That's the debt that you and I have, which absolutely dwarfs our public debt. The way we funded the second life cycle of the suburban experiment is by taking on enormous amounts of debt, okay? And we can see how in the latest housing crisis, this actually became so important to our economy that it actually became predatory. We do not have the capacity anymore to continue this experiment through accumulating more and more debt. Our places have to become financially more productive. The challenge that we face right now is that the burden for maintenance is being shifted from the federal government to the state governments, from the state governments to the local governments. And when you look at local governments literally have 5 cents, 10 cents, 20 cents on the dollar of what is needed to maintain all of this stuff that we've created. This is an amazing burden, and it's one that we can't meet, but it provides us a tremendous opportunity because no longer is our future development pattern going to be tied to funding coming from Washington and all the requirements that entails. But we have the ability now at the local level to decide what our communities are going to look like. This is my hometown. This is Brainerd, Minnesota. This photo was taken in 1894. We would kill to have this street today. I mean, this place totally rocks, doesn't it? I love this street. Look at all the stuff going on. Look at all the buildings. Look at all the people. Look at all the things. We built this before the Interstate Highway Act, before the home mortgage interest deduction, before local economic development initiatives, before tax increment financing, before zoning. We built this before the 30-year mortgage. We built places that rocked back when we had to build them to be financially sound. This is what this street looks like today. Basically a wasteland of parking and half-occupied buildings. You know, we talk a lot in this country about living beyond our means. And a lot of times what we get the visual picture of in our mind is the poor family that buys the big screen TV when they should be saving for something else. But if you want to see living beyond our means, you can travel cities all over this country and see streets exactly like this. There's $500,000 of infrastructure just in that block. And the return we get from it is nothing. A little bit of stored cars and some half-vacant buildings. It's not good enough. We have an opportunity to start thinking about how we design our buildings, our public buildings differently. This was the courthouse in my hometown. We built this in the 1920s. And when we built it, we intentionally used architecture that related who we were as people, a Greco-Roman society with a Greco-Roman form of government. And we placed this building that we collectively funded at the most important, most prominent termination of a street that there was in the city. We wanted everybody within range of this building to be able to see this building, because seeing this building and being within its orb created an immense amount of value for all these properties. Real physical financial value that would be captured because of this investment. This is the new county courthouse that we just recently built kitty corner to the old one. And this one also captures our values as a society, as you can see with the acres of parking that we put out front. We want to make sure that every car has a safe and happy home when it travels to town. This building expresses nothing really about who we are except for confusion. You really look at it and you really are not sure what you're even looking at. And unfortunately, we did choose to terminate another one of the most important streets in town with this building, only we did it with the loading docks and the dumpsters. Why would we do this? We do it because we're so obsessed with moving cars and parking cars that we don't stop to consider how a place like this can actually provide value for a community. We do the same thing with parks, and we have a tremendous opportunity today to start looking at our parks differently. This is a park in my hometown, and you can see this was a grand place. I mean, this was a really spectacular place. Now, we didn't build this park because we were wealthy. We became wealthy because we built parks like this. It's parks like this that are magnets for wealth. They're wealth generation machines, because every building and every structure within walking distance of this park became more valuable. And the people who traveled from their houses to town every day for work, back and forth, would travel through this park. It mattered to them. Today we drive by it, and we don't exist in it. It's not part of our daily life. We drive by it. And so what's happened is the park has devolved into, birch mulch, easily maintained shrubs, and a bunch of Arbor Day projects kind of randomly spaced throughout. This is not a value creation machine. And if we want to capture the lost value out of our communities, we need to start looking at them differently. But this is not just about our places, it's also about us. These are my two girls. That's Chloe on the right and Stella on the left. And, I think my wife and I are pretty average parents. We have our girls involved in activities. We take them to church. They go to public school. They're in dance and gymnastics and swimming and all that. This is where we live. When we chose our location for our house, it's before we had kids, but we knew that this would be a great place to raise kids. I mean, it was a safe location. There's a lot of room there. There's a lot of place for them to play. We thought this would be a wonderful place for kids to grow up. When my daughter started kindergarten, she came home on the first day and said, "Dad, I've met the most wonderful person. She's just beautiful. She's just wonderful. I think she's going to be my best friend. Her name is Holly." And this Holly on the far right here. And Holly has become a very important part of our family. She's a fantastic kid and very important to my oldest daughter. This is where Holly lives. She lives literally right across the street from us. And before you think that she just moved there, her family's actually lived there longer than we have. The way we have arranged ourselves on the landscape is so isolating from each other that we could actually exist 500 feet from my daughter's best friend and not even know she was there. In an age where innovation is driven by our ability to collaborate, where ideas are the source of capital for our economies, how much more full could our lives be? How much more fulfilling could we be as people? How much more productive could we be if we were arranged differently? If we had those casual interactions? How many of us have best friends that we've never met and never will meet because we just don't have the opportunity to do it? So today we're at a pivot point in history. As a people, as an economy, as a nation, we're at a point where we're being asked to reevaluate everything about who we are, what we want to be, what our economy is, what our values are. And we have an opportunity today to think differently about our places, about how we capture value out of them. And in the process, not only can we strengthen our economy, but we can become a much better people. Thank you very much.